This is E&P Reports from Editor and Publisher Magazine, the authoritative voice of news media since 1884, serving newspapers, broadcasts, digital, and all multimedia news publishing. And greetings once again, Mike Blinder, publisher, E&P Magazine. As always, we plead with you to follow us if you are listening on your favorite podcast platform. Watching us on YouTube, there is a subscribe button below me, a bell to the right. Hit that thing. You'll get an update each and every time we upload a new episode of E&P Reports. Nancy Lane, CEO of Local Media Association and Local Media Foundation. You and I are we're just getting to know each other. No, I've known you for 18 years. Did you know that? It's 18 years.
I did.
We go back, I think, before there was an Internet Advertising Bureau. We were both in the dark ages of this multimedia world. I'm honored to have you here on this program. We had you on over a year ago to talk about the industry and the plight of COVID, but I have to give you one compliment, if I may. There's a Chinese proverb, and I know I'm misquoting it because I don't speak Mandarin, that says, make friends with change. It's the only thing you can count on. And I think, Nancy, that should be on the back of your business card. I have never seen someone in this industry that never stands still. You're always moving, you're always changing, you're always jibing, you're always trying to stay, if I may use that old quote, staying where the puck is going, if you know what I mean. And so I just want to give you a compliment as I've watched what you've done within this industry.
Well, that means a lot coming from you, Mike, and back at you. I love what you're doing with E&P. I think you have reinvented the brand and have made it very relevant again. So the compliment is mutual.
All right, Nancy, we're going to talk a bit about Meta and the changes there, your opinion of it, and also get you to talk about the industry in general, and we'll do that on the backside of this message.
This episode of E&P Reports is sponsored by IQ Audience Plus by Town News. Consumer revenue has never been more important. Digital leaders at media organizations worldwide are asking the same question. How do we accelerate the growth of consumer revenue? Traditional one-size-fits-all paywalls aren't the answer. They're blunt instruments that treat all visitors the same way, costing you money. IQ Audience Plus by Town News is a smart, dynamic metering solution that empowers you to maximize revenue by identifying key audiences, seeding engagement, and growing membership and subscriptions. Ready to supercharge your consumer revenue, grow engagement, and bolster your advertising income? Visit townnews.com/EP today to learn more about IQ Audience Plus by Town News.
All right, Nancy, on December 3rd, a gentleman by the name of Dick Toffel, and I've known him over the years, I've read some of his blogs, put up in his blog an interesting, unvarnished, unabashed piece questioning how philanthropy is being done. And within it, he kind of says there's flaws within the process. He kind of poked at, or he didn't say kind things about Lion, local independent online news publishers, and Knight Foundation. You tweeted back about how you felt that this was not the proper thing, or this wasn't done in context. And then it got picked up by Neiman, but this was so funny. So then I didn't see it coming. As this is going on, this dialogue about the philanthropy and the funding, suddenly the Meta Journalism Project lays off their staff. This is a very interesting time as people are trying to take sides on both sides of the equation. We just put on E&P. We picked up your post on LinkedIn. You did it, and you put it up there, and you basically told a story about what Meta has done for the industry, but you didn't just spout off, if I may be so bold, and just give an opinion. You used hard numbers. And there's a lot of strong logic to what you posted there. It was $16.8 million alone that the LMA gave back to the industry, correct?
Correct.
And how did that break down? I mean, how do you see the benefit of that Meta money over the last, since 2019, correct?
Absolutely. So that's what I think people don't realize. When the Meta Journalism Project funds industry orgs, a good chunk of that money ends up going directly back to the orgs. That was the beauty of the Meta Journalism Project and their model. So in the 16.8 million that we distributed since 2020, a little over 12 million of that was through the COVID-19 relief fund. And that was just for people to keep the lights on.
Right.
So we were calling publishers who applied, and a lot of publishers applied. And we tried to find the neediest of the publishers. So these were a lot of smaller publishers. And
not to be interruptive, did these people have to be LMA members to apply for these funds?
Oh God, no.
Okay.
We never, we are tax exempt, which means we must serve the industry. We take that charge seriously. Membership is one part of what we do, and we hope that you think our work is worth a small membership fee, but our charge is to serve the entire industry. So no, you did not have to be a member. A lot of the recipients were not LMA members, but we were calling small publishers, publishers with staffs of 10 or less, and saying, we're going to send you $100,000. This is like 2 months after COVID hit, and the tears and the hallelujahs and the emotion that we heard on the other end of the telephone. And when we did that survey, 23% said the funding outright saved their newsroom from extinction. And for many others, it prevented them from laying off staff. And most importantly, they were able to keep reporting on COVID in local communities, which at the time, getting information out was essential. So a good chunk of that went to the COVID relief, but another 4.1 million was distributed through the accelerators. And that gave local media companies grants of, on average, 50,000 to experiment and figure out a reader revenue strategy, whether it was investing in new technology or using part of it for marketing, to really win in that space. It's a critical leg on the revenue stool. And so they were also investing heavily in business transformation funding, another 280,000 through branded content project grants, again, to experiment with branded content. And then we had 3 companies in a very special project with Crosstown at University of Southern California. And those funds paid for a half of a data journalist salary with 3 local media orgs. So it was a wide variety of programs. That money was instrumental in helping those companies with their business transformation efforts.
There are some, and you know this, and I'm sure, and we discussed this years ago in this very program, that say we should be not involved at all with big tech right now. They took 70% of the local revenue off the tables, which hurt these newsrooms that need funding. Moreover, they're exploiting our content. And that when we take these few coffers, I'm not trying to take a side here. I'm simply saying, that's just a rounding error, a few $100 million to these guys. They're just trying to lobby us so we don't go into Congress and pass the safe harbor bill. We don't attack them for antitrust. What say you to them that believed that the world was just black and white? There was no gray in the middle. Do you see where I'm saying? Where do you believe that this philanthropy was really there to support the news and the local newsrooms and help us maintain local journalism?
I 100% believe that. The other issues are separate in my mind.
Okay.
The Meta Journalism Project was designed to partner with news orgs and see if together Meta, who increasingly found themselves in the news business, they didn't set out to, but one day they woke up and they were in the news business, could work with local media orgs. And I would argue we did a lot of good together. So local media orgs started to rely on referral traffic from Facebook, and it really helped drive their audience. And when the algorithm changed and, they didn't get as much referral traffic, that wasn't a good thing. At the same time, a lot of companies were complaining that they didn't want Facebook to be in the business of news, so they would, on one hand, say they benefited from the referral traffic, brought in new eyeballs, new audience that never would, probably have clicked on their stories before. On the other hand, they resented that they were in the news business. So you can't have it both ways, right? So I felt like a lot of progress was being made. There was a lot of good. there's a lot of issues, as we both know, with Facebook. But in terms of the Meta Journalism Project and the folks that they brought on board and their commitment to being a good partner to the local news ecosystem, they were fantastic. And together we did great work. That's what I'll say about that.
The branded content project, full disclosure, is something that E&P got involved with. We actually launched it into one market and wrote about it and did a case study. I believe it was Pamplin newspapers, where we worked with, and I have to say that the data we found that Gordon Burrell Associates put out initially was correct. The appetite for small businesses is strong for content marketing. Can I use that term? Because there's branded content. There's so many different names for it now. I mean, I'm so old, I remember the word advertorial, which I know it's not necessarily the same thing. I'm just saying, but they're craving content over ads. Do you see that dying now? Or do you see, can you save this project? Or where are you guys going? This all hit you, just a few days ago. You didn't have a board meeting on this yet or anything.
Well, we would talk at board meetings. Facebook was our number one funder. What happens if Facebook funding goes away? But it was just like, what happens if the classified network goes away, right? We have to reinvent ourselves. And we didn't have, what if a global pandemic hits and we can't have in-person events, which were also driving a big chunk of our revenue and a lot of others. You always have to be looking ahead, and you always have to be diversifying your revenue streams. And so I would say we knew this day would probably come.
Okay.
And we prepared for it. And I will also say that Meta made sure that several of our programs were funded through the end of 2024 with the funds in the bank. And that's Branded Content Project and the Local News Resource Center. And we're thankful for that. It gives us runway. But I don't think you'll see Branded Content Project go away between us and LMC. The project has been wildly successful. Over 50 million has been sold by a wide range of companies, as large as ABC O&O, down to my favorite, Chris Bennett at the Seattle Medium, a Black newspaper, small publisher, sells over $500,000 by going through the boot camp. I mean, it has been one of the most successful programs I've ever seen. So no way we're going to let that die. We will find other funding. So it leaves a void for us. It leaves a void for all of us that serve the industry. It really leaves a void for the media companies who participated in reader revenue accelerators, branded content boot camps, the programs that also provided money back to them. That goes away. To me, that's the worst part about this.
I'm going to dial back a bit and talk about our relationship together. I was on tour with the Newspaper Association America 2002, I think 2003, when they had a small market initiative. When NAA shut that down, the SNPA, the forerunner of LMA, SNPA stood for Suburban Newspaper Publishers of America, and you were the CEO of that organization. SNA.
Yes.
Suburban Newspapers of America, SNPA, yes. Southern. We did the tour. You picked it up, and it was very newspaper centric. We parted ways at a time when this is not accusatory. This is just the lay of the land. Remember, I was a revenue generator for newspapers, did $100 million over 20 years. And a lot of that was legacy, meaning I'm in a market attacking other legacy like radio and television. I'm representing one of three major legacy, and they're yellow pages when they used to exist as well, and all the other things. So, but you had a vision that was interesting. You said we're no longer newspaper centric. Legacy media has to band together and then form the LMA. This is before Lion. This is before all the other, where journalism was just journalism, or news was news, or media was just media. You don't regret that decision now, do you? You're pretty comfortable in the lane you've picked, where I could be in an organization where sitting right next to me is a local competitor, right? I have a newspaper in a market. There's the radio guy in the market. There's the television guy in the market. And we're all working together for one common cause. That is the LMA, correct?
It certainly is. And I think we would have been out of business if we didn't reinvent ourselves. Truly believe that.
The battle is not legacy against legacy. The battle is survival.
and it's collaboration, and it's bringing everyone in local media together for the purpose of sharing and collaborating and learning and pursuing opportunities together. And in all the collaborations, you're seeing broadcasters work with newspapers and digital sites in the same market. Look at Oklahoma Media Center. We have over 30 news orgs, mainly in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, although we've been expanding a lot more, all working together, all working with tribal media, first-time mainstream media and indigenous media working together. They are competitors on a day in, day out basis, but they're finding common ground. And guess what? The ecosystem is stronger because of that. So we come in with that collaborative umbrella. There's a lot of advertising that is not going to anyone in that local space. It's going elsewhere. And so they're no longer the evil competitors that they once were.
But in a way, you're sitting on a fence because you're working in collaboration with big tech, Facebook. I have to ask the question, that is taking some of that local revenue off the table that you're collaboratively trying to help them get back. That is a very interesting fence to sit on sometimes. Has that made it difficult for you at the organization?
So, we don't think we ever had the digital advertising. I mean, once the internet disrupted legacy media.
It wasn't the two companies.
The newspapers never had a big amount of digital revenue, neither did the broadcasters. Like, they have a lot of legacy revenue. New tech came in, whether that was eBay, Monster, Craigslist, LinkedIn. They're all taking pieces of it. Facebook, Google's a search engine. That's not the business that local media is in. So to me, it's not they took the revenue. We didn't have the digital revenue when the internet came, and we didn't find ways. We're bullish on digital revenue in terms of things like branded content. And when the Chris Bennett story is just, it's an amazing story. $500,000, in branded content revenue in 14 months for a small Black publisher. We're not selling a CPM basis with that, right? We're selling flat rate. It's high value. It's not a banner ad that gets, 1% click through. How's that great for the advertiser? It's not clickbait ads and taboola, right?
Right.
It's high quality content that people want to consume and brands want to have their name associated with. So we are bullish on digital revenue opportunities, but it's on things more like branded content than that low CPM, low click rate, not a great user experience advertising. And it's one leg of the stool. Reader revenue, journalism funded by philanthropy. There are other legs of the stool that are just as important. I'll say one more thing. I was in Zaragoza with Alan Fisco, the president of the Seattle Times, and he told the audience they're now 70% reader revenue. The model's reversed. At one point, they were probably 70% advertising. And he said that's what saved them, right? And they have a very healthy newsroom. A lot of reporters still working for the Seattle Times, and they flipped the model. They're no longer as dependent on advertising. And I would just argue that's a good strategy.
You're talking about the WAN-EFR conference where you were on the stage. Were you, I think, with Toby Coladra from the Star?
Yes.
From the Star Tribune, Alan Fisco, president of the Seattle Times. This was in Spain. And it got a lot of review. I mean, I was actually tracking what you guys were doing over here. But okay, so, and Alan did say that he's got 70% reader revenue. Again, journalism funded by philanthropy, which is right now in a very interesting place, as we're seeing, at least with one major funding source having some problems. And big tech right now is going through its own problem. But not all that philanthropy comes from big tech. We're clear about that, right? There is other philanthropy, branded content. And then, of course, what you just said, industry collaboration, which is where we work together, and we work across all media in order to help each other keep journalism alive. But let me ask you a question. What say you to someone like Jeff Jarvis, who was on this very program just a few weeks ago, who basically said paywalls damage democracy, we should not. I mean, I'm sure you saw some of these posts that are out there now, and studies show that the news can't just be for only the elite. It has to be driven down, or who also is not into any form of he's okay with legacy media dying right now. He basically said, just let it go. No handouts. Let the ecosystem continue. And his exact words on this program were, yes, the Constitution states that we're supposed to have a free and unfettered press, but nowhere in it does it say you need to have a press. In other words, if a town lacks a voice, it was meant to be. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. That's pretty much what he said in this program. Response? Do you have a comment on that at all?
Yeah. So Jeff and I agree on almost everything. Truly, we do, but I don't agree with them here. And I'm sure that doesn't surprise you. Legacy media is really important in the ecosystem. We say a healthy local media ecosystem needs many players. The new nonprofit startups, radio, TV, newspapers, digital sites. There's a place for all of them. There's not enough news in most local communities now. There are a lot of beats that don't get covered and a lot of stories that don't get told. So to say that the legacy media that have paywalls should be shut down, think about the stories coming out of those legacy papers. And everybody likes to say, oh, but they're on this side or that side. The Times Union brought down the lieutenant governor of New York, and that's Democrat. Others have brought down politicians on the other side. One thing about journalists, they are always holding the powerful accountable. They're always holding government officials, elected officials accountable on both sides. And the bulk of that work happens at these legacy organizations that people like to take shots at. Now, am I concerned about being elitist? Am I concerned about 1% of the population pays for the subscription, so all that great work isn't being consumed by 99%? You bet I am. And I really love journalism funded by philanthropy that includes opening up the paywall. So if a philanthropist comes in and sponsors some climate change journalism, and part of the agreement is that's outside of the paywall, yes, I applaud that. At the same time, I know that journalism is expensive to produce. The model always was a subscription. You got your newspaper on the doorstep, you paid for it. Why wouldn't you pay for it in digital? I see both sides. I'm concerned. I'm concerned about lower income individuals not having access to news. It bothers me and it keeps me up at night. You bet it does.
There you go. So there will be another initiative for LMA to explore. All right, let me take you back a few months. I was asked to go out to Colorado Press and host a luncheon panel, about 150 in the audience, and my panel was all nonprofits. And the title of the panel was the state of local news in Colorado, but everyone that was picked to be on my panel was a nonprofit. So as I started, I asked the audience, raise your hand if you're just a normal legacy media company trying to eke out a living, and 3/4 of the audience were those guys. Then go back to Toffel, not his comments about philanthropy, but Dick Toffel again on this very program, and maybe he's not as relevant as he used to be when he started ProPublica. I mean, that's what I'm hearing from some. But he basically said there is no place left for profit journalism. I mean, and I saw this in Colorado in a way where the brainiacs, and you even know that. Did you know the Aurora Sentinel, which just passed hands, is going to try the what do you call it, the sell shares to the community model? Do you believe there is still room for-profit top-line media, or are we moving into a nonprofit model? And that may be the future and the sustainable model for local journalism.
Yeah, we think the argument between for-profit and nonprofit is not the issue, because there's successful versions of both. It's a tax status to us. There are some bad players in the for-profit world, right? That cause these headlines. That got the newsrooms down to nothing. Ghost newsrooms is what some folks call them. Mm-hmm. And we know who those players are. And that's what gives for-profit a bad name. You know what? I know a lot of journalists who work for those organizations, and they're some of the best in the business, and they're doing incredible work. So let's not dismiss those journalists working hard in those important communities. On the other hand, you've got the family and independent owned local media. You've got Tom Shaw and Liz White, Janice Ware and Larry Lee, smaller family owned papers that have been in their families for 1 or 2 or 3 generations. In the case of the Afro, 6 generations.
Or Otis Brumbley in Atlanta, who just picked up a whole mess more and is a family that's been in the business for 150. There's so many of them out there that have ink in their veins. That's the expression I use when we refer to them.
And nobody's getting rich owning a newspaper anymore. Let me just say that. Like, it may be 15, 20 years ago, it was very lucrative. Today, you own that newspaper, you're in it because you care about that community, you care about journalism, and maybe you're making a comfortable living, but you're not making millions upon millions, let's face it. So the for-profit, the notion that you can't own a small business and it happens to be a news business and make a living from it without going to a non-profit status is crazy to me. And if you talk to any of our Word and Black publishers and the legacies that a lot of their parents built and they have since taken over, what is wrong with that model? Nothing. So don't confuse some bad players in the for-profit space with so many good players. It's a tax status. And the people who are in it for the right reasons, who aren't gutting their newsrooms, who are making a commitment to journalism, they're the people I'll bet on whether they have a nonprofit status or a for-profit status.
Well said. And I also like the fact, it's my show, so I can blow smoke at you if I want, but I also like the fact that you mentioned that it's newspaper industry is not just big dogs. It's not just major. Well, let's discuss that. Let's discuss the big city brands that are now hurting, because you're right. They used to have 50% profit margins based on, they weren't really selling. They were distribution models, right? Classified ads and inserts. This was where they made most of their money, and the agencies would pick up full page ads. And then as that business waned, those cities have lost some of those brands, but the communities around them still have some very viable players that are still doing well. Let's go to those brands, like the Denver Post, which is now kind of under siege from nonprofit. We just had Imitaz Patel on this program, and I had him on a panel at a conference, who is the Baltimore Banner. I mean, do you think these brands that you and I knew years ago, I mean, you could buy the Buffalo News now for probably $7 million. I mean, compared to the 300 or 400 or 500 million it was worth 20 years ago. Is it important to maintain those legacy brands, Nancy, in your opinion? I mean, we both go way back and we remember them. I was a Philadelphia boy like you. I grew up with the Inquirer. You went to Cardinal O'Hara. I went to Haverford High. We were just blocks away. And I got the Bulletin in the afternoons. Do you remember those days?
We did. Yes, we did.
Yeah. So how important is that? Do you believe Philadelphia could be a news desert without the Inquirer, or the Buffalo could be a news desert without the Buffalo Evening News?
Look, I think some are going to make it and some aren't. And I think ownership matters. So
well, okay.
Philadelphia's backed by Lenfest.
Right.
I'll bet on Philadelphia. Seattle Times and Blethen family, I bet on Seattle. Bet on Minneapolis. Bet on.
How do you feel about the Colorado? The Chicago Sun-Times being picked up by nonprofit radio?
I think it's a really interesting experiment. I'm personally thrilled to see it. As you know, I lived in Chicago for 4 years.
I know.
And there are a lot of local media outlets in the city. And we had a collaborative there for 2 years solving for Chicago. And I really got to know and work with a lot of them. It's a good thing that WBZ and the Sun-Times have come together. It's good to have another voice in that market. The Tribune, with their ownership change, is challenged. I think Mitch Pugh is one of the best editors in the country. So I'm certainly rooting for the Chicago Tribune. I'm rooting for the Sun-Times. I'm rooting for WBZ. What we say at LMA is we're rooting for all of them to win. Like, we're not these other organizations that come in and say, let legacy media burn to the ground and die. Nonprofit is the only way to go. I don't know how they look themselves in the mirror if they say that local news is essential to a healthy democracy. Because consumers like to consume news in different ways, in different voices, and the more, the better. So, I'm rooting for all of them, quite honestly.
I had this, we're getting to the end of our journey. I wanted to ask you a question about broadcast now. And, you know, I have broadcast in my veins, started as a disc jockey, managed television. I entered this industry obliquely because I was brought over to start one of the first websites for the Portland, Maine Press Herald. I was running a radio group in New England at the time. You're representing companies you have companies at the LMA that compete in markets with other broadcasters, 3 or 4 TV stations with news operations in cities. Some predict that's not sustainable now, especially with streaming, where the only real local content they have is that local news, period. Everything else is streamable. I even saw Willie Geist on the Sunday morning say, and make sure you watch on Peacock the game later today. And I'm thinking, if I'm managing a local TV station, I'm throwing my coffee at the screen. Shut up. I have media to sell in that block. How do you feel about the future? And I don't want to put you on the spot. Where is the broadcast industry going now in this wacky digital world?
Yeah, no doubt that broadcast is about to be disrupted, but they're doing fine. And this was a political year, okay?
Yes.
Each political year seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's every other year, okay? So there's always a down year, then an up year. They're doing fine. Retrans will be the issue for them, and they're preparing for it. They are getting really smart on the digital side. They are focusing on first-party data collection. They still have the resources to do this stuff. They are still investing in their businesses. They're not in a crisis mode by any means. So I think the biggest problem for everyone in local media is the attention that people have for news right now. And I think in Zaragoza, we learned that like almost a third of people are actively avoiding news right now globally. And so that's a problem, all of us, whether you're a broadcaster, newspaper, digital site, you name it, you know, people are just turned off by it. And there's a lot of issues with trust. And so these are things we have to come together as an industry and address. We have to look ourselves in the mirror too, Mike, because some of the trust issues are things that we haven't done right over the years. And I see a lot of media companies focused on it and getting better at it. The cable providers don't do us any favors, which causes people to paint all media as bad. You know, I'm sure you tell people you work for the media industry like I do, and you get an earful. If you're in an Uber, I started like downplaying when people ask me what I do if I don't know them. I don't want to get into some ugly debate. There are a lot of issues, a lot of things working against us. But at the end of the day, man, I'm proud to be in this industry. I am proud to represent local media and see the innovation and the great journalism going on.
We'll leave it at that, because I like that positive take for turning the corner into 2023. Nancy Lane, CEO of Local Media Association, the Local Media Foundation. Nancy, if anyone would like to learn more about the LMA and becoming part of your organization, you have an easy email address, don't you?
I sure do, nancy.lane@localmedia.org.
And I love your Twitter handle, which is?
Local Media Rocks.
I think that's great. Nancy, I hope you'll join us again later on in the months to come and give us an update on what's happening. We appreciate your valuable time and hope you have a very healthy and relaxing holiday season.
Same to you, Mike. Good to see you.